Welcome back to Goosebump on the Midnight series, where the most terrifying haunted stories are told. Thank you for your interest and for listening to our channel's story. Today, we delve into a new story titled Serenity's Sorrow. Let's listen together and see where the story leads and how it concludes on tonight's episode of Goosebump on the Midnight. Please support the channel by like the video if you enjoyed it. Comment with your thoughts on the story and its ending. Share this video with your friends and family. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next thrilling horror story. Thank you all for tuning in. Ethan Vance had come to realize that silence has many shades. There was the peaceful silence of a nascent morning, when the city was still drowsy. There was the solemn silence of an old library, where the only sound was the rustle of turning pages. And then there was the silence he was living in now, a silence so thick and heavy it felt like a waterlogged woolen blanket, draped over every corner of his 18th floor apartment. It smelled of dust and old sorrows, and it tasted of cold meals and coffee reheated one too many times. It had been 1 year, 3 months, and 7 days since Anna, his younger sister, had left. Ethan didn't use the word died. He found it too sudden, too cruel. He preferred to think that his sister was just somewhere very far away, a place with no cell service, no internet, and, of course, no him. Their apartment, once a home echoing with the laughter of 2 siblings, had now become an exhibition of absence. The fern Anna used to water had withered on the balcony. The small flower tea set she loved most remained untouched in a glass cabinet, veiled by a thin layer of dust. Ethan didn't dare to clear away her things. Every time he considered it, he felt as if he were personally erasing the last traces of the existence he cherished most. He lived with them, with the ghosts of memory, and with the silence. Work was his only salvation. Ethan was an antique restorer, a job that demanded meticulousness, patience, and a special ability to converse with the past through cracked wood and peeling lacquer. His small workshop, tucked away in a hidden alley off Oak Street, was the only place he felt truly alive. There, he could spend hours mending a rotten 19th century wooden chest or reviving the faded patterns on an old screen. He was healing objects, yet he was powerless to mend his own soul. That Saturday afternoon was like any other. Ethan was engrossed in his work on a rosewood trunk, trying to remove a new layer of varnish that an ignorant owner had applied to it. The acrid smell of chemicals filled his nostrils, but he was used to it. His hands moved with the practiced grace of a surgeon. He was lost in his work when his phone vibrated. It was his mother. "Hello, Mom." "Ethan, honey, what are you doing? Not going out this weekend?" Her voice on the other end always carried a hint of nameless anxiety. "I'm at the workshop, Mom. Just a little work." "Work again? You need to rest." "I was just cleaning up Anna's room." Her voice caught for a moment. "That I found an old box of her things, just some random stuff she bought on her trips. Do you want to come see, or should I?" "I'll come," Ethan interrupted, his voice a bit hoarse. "I'll stop by tonight after I finish up here." He didn't want his mother to face those keepsakes alone. Her pain was already great enough. At 8 o'clock, Ethan drove to the familiar house in the Brookside district. The house was the same, but the air inside seemed heavier. His mother handed him a yellowed cardboard box. "It's all in here. Just trinkets she collected." Ethan took the box back to his apartment. He set it down in the middle of the living room and stared at it for several minutes. Opening this box was like reopening a wound that hadn't healed. But he knew he had to. He took a deep breath and sliced through the packing tape with a utility knife. Inside was Anna's entire world. Postcards from Charleston and Aspen. A few old movie tickets. A stack of French literature. A couple of tiny cloth dolls. Ethan picked up each item, and memories flooded back like a torrent. He smiled, a rare, twisted smile. Then he saw it. Tucked at the bottom of the box, wrapped in a piece of deep red velvet, was a wooden music box. It wasn't large, just fitting in the palm of his hand. Ethan lifted it out carefully. He was an expert in wood, and he recognized it instantly. This was rosewood, a precious timber with fantastical, swirling grains like clouds. The box was exquisitely crafted, with the four corners carved into the shape of climbing roses, now tinged with the color of time. Its surface had a few small scratches, the glossy finish long since faded. It possessed a quiet, ancient beauty. Ethan turned the box over. No manufacturer's name, no year of creation. There was only a single line of text, hand-carved, the script fine and very faded. He had to bring it close to the light, squinting to read it. Serenity Villa. Dreamer's Hill, Pinecrest. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. Pinecrest. Anna had taken a solo trip to Pinecrest just 2 weeks before. Before she was gone. She said it was a trip to find her balance, to breathe the fresh air. He hadn't thought much of it then. But now, this music box, with its mysterious address, planted a seed of doubt in his heart. The police had concluded that Anna died from a stroke. No signs of external force, no suicide note. A natural death that was absurdly unnatural for a vibrant 23-year-old girl. Ethan had never believed it. He always felt that something was amiss, a gap in the story that no one could fill. He tried turning the small key on the side of the music box. A few turns. Then he released it. A slow, clear, but mournful melody began to play. It was unlike any tune he had ever heard. The melody was beautiful but carried a profound sadness, like the sigh of a lonely soul. It made the already silent room feel even more oppressive. The music repeated, a loop of sorrow. Ethan sat motionless, listening. The music box. Serenity Villa. Pinecrest. The disparate pieces suddenly appeared before him, inviting him to assemble them into a complete picture. Could it be that the answer he had always sought was not in this bustling city, but somewhere in the misty highlands? Could it be that Anna's death was not a random twist of fate, but was connected to this place, to this haunting music box? The scientist in him, the rational restorer, screamed that this was baseless speculation. But the heart of a broken brother told him this was the only path forward. He had to go there. He had to find the place called Serenity Villa and find out what role it played in his sister's final days. The mournful melody of the music box continued to play, like a summons from another world, a forgotten world. And for the first time in over a year, Ethan felt a sense of purpose, even if that purpose might lead him to a truth more horrifying than the pain he was already bearing. He picked up the phone and dialed Leo Morgan's number. "Leo, you busy? I've got something. You might find it interesting. It involves a trip to Pinecrest." On the other end of the line, Leo's sleepy voice instantly sharpened at the last two words. "Pinecrest? What's the scoop? Tell me more." "This isn't a game," Ethan said, his eyes fixed on the music box on the table. "I think I'm about to find a ghost story." Leo chuckled on the other end, the hearty laugh of a man who didn't believe in ghosts but was utterly fascinated by stories about them. "All right, my friend. I have a feeling this is going to be a trip to remember. You've piqued the interest of a filmmaker." Ethan didn't laugh. He just gripped the phone tighter, feeling the coldness from it seep into his palm. He didn't know where this journey would lead, but he knew one thing for sure: it wouldn't be a vacation. It was a pilgrimage into darkness, and he was ready to face whatever lurked there, as long as it gave him answers about Anna. The call ended, leaving only the sorrowful music of the rosewood box. It was like a whisper, a promise of secrets about to be revealed. Ethan looked out the window, where the city lights glittered brightly against the night. But in his eyes now, everything was just a dreary gray, like the dense fog that so often blanketed the hills of Pinecrest. Leo Morgan was everything Ethan was not. While Ethan was introverted and reserved, Leo was an extrovert, talkative, and capable of befriending anyone within 5 minutes. Ethan saw the world through a lens of nostalgia and fine details. Leo saw it through a camera lens, always hunting for dramatic angles and sensational stories that could be turned into a viral documentary. They were polar opposites, but it was that very difference that had bonded their friendship for the past 15 years. When Ethan laid out his plan at a familiar coffee shop the next morning, Leo listened with intense focus, his eyes shining behind his black-rimmed glasses. He turned the music box over and over in his hands, scrutinizing every detail with the eye of a director appraising a prop. "Rosewood, handcrafted," Leo commented, his tone professional. "Looks genuinely old. Are you sure the address carved on it is real?" "I've looked it up," Ethan replied. "There's no official information online about a place called Serenity Villa on Dreamer's Hill. But there are a few scattered posts on old travel forums, talking about an abandoned old villa on a nearby hill. The locals call it by different names. They say the place is haunted." Leo raised an eyebrow, a delighted smile playing on his lips. "Haunted? Even better. A haunted old villa in Pinecrest, a restorer seeking the truth about his sister's death, a documentary filmmaker tagging along to record it all. Ethan, this isn't a ghost story anymore, it's a perfect movie script." "I'm not kidding, Leo." "Neither am I," Leo said, his voice turning serious again. "I know how important this is to you. And if there's even a 1% chance of finding something related to Anna, I'm with you all the way. But we need more people." "More people?" Ethan frowned. He had wanted a quiet trip. "That's right. We need a third perspective, someone with expertise. You're the heart, I'm the pragmatist. We need someone in the middle, someone who can analyze what we might experience from a more scientific angle. It'll make my film. I mean, our investigation." More credible. Leo explained, I know a girl. Chloe Reed. She's a doctoral candidate in criminal psychology. Very smart, very sharp. She's writing her dissertation on what she calls mass hysteria syndrome, how ghostly rumors form and spread within a community. She'd be the perfect final piece. Ethan hesitated. He didn't want to turn his pain into someone else's research project. But he had to admit, Leo's reasoning was sound. If what they were about to face was merely a product of their imagination, a psychologist could help them see that. And if it was real, an extra sane mind wouldn't hurt. All right, Ethan nodded. If she agrees. The meeting with Chloe Reed was arranged for that afternoon. Chloe was not what Ethan had imagined a dry academic to be. She was quite young, around 24 or 25, with long black hair and large, clear eyes that held a strange depth. She listened to Ethan's story attentively, her slender hands resting lightly on a notepad. She showed no skepticism or pity, only genuine empathy. When Ethan finished, Chloe was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. Mass hysteria syndrome often originates from a real tragedy, she began, her voice soft but clear. A traumatic event shocks a community, and then it gets embroidered with supernatural elements through generations of storytelling. The house becomes a vessel for the fear and anxiety of an entire region. People don't actually see ghosts, but they want to believe in them, because it's an easier explanation than accepting some raw, brutal truth. So you're saying it's all just rumors? Leo asked. Chloe shook her head. I'm not saying that. I believe there are energies, memories that are imprinted on certain special places. Science can't measure them yet, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. I just want to approach this as objectively as possible. She turned to Ethan, her eyes shining with deep sympathy. I'm very sorry about your sister. And if this trip can help you find peace, whatever the answer may be, I'm willing to join. And so, the group was formed. A broken-hearted restorer, a thrill-seeking filmmaker, and a sharp-witted psychologist. 3 strangers, connected by an old music box and a call from a forgotten place. 2 days later, they were on their way. Leo's pickup truck rolled out of the bustling capital, heading for the highlands. The mood in the truck was relaxed. Leo played loud music and told endless jokes, trying to lighten the heavy atmosphere. Chloe sat in the back, flipping through a thick book on the folklore of the highlands. As for Ethan, he just stared silently out the window. The higher they climbed, the more the landscape changed. Green rice fields were replaced by vast pine forests and winding, twisting slopes. And then the fog began to appear. It wasn't the thin, romantic mist of the movies. This was a thick, milk-white fog that swallowed the road ahead. Leo had to turn on his fog lights and slow down. The air outside grew colder. The cold of Pinecrest wasn't the dry chill of air conditioning. It was a damp cold that seeped through every layer of clothing and into the skin. They arrived in Pinecrest as evening fell. The city appeared hazy in the fog, its old French-style roofs emerging like something from a dream. Following directions from a few locals Leo had contacted beforehand, they found their way to the Dreamers Hill area. The paved road soon ended, giving way to a red dirt track, bumpy and slick. The truck groaned as it climbed the steep inclines. The deeper they went, the denser the trees became, nearly blocking out the sunlight. Finally, they found a small wooden house nestled on the hillside, smoke curling from its chimney. This was the home of Old Man Miller, said to be the one who knew this hill best. Old Man Miller was a man in his 70s, his weathered face deeply etched with the lines of time and harsh weather, but his eyes were incredibly sharp. He received them with caution, offering them hot tea, but his eyes couldn't hide his suspicion when they asked about Serenity Villa. Serenity? Old Man Miller took a sip of tea and shook his head. Nobody around here calls it by that name. That pretty name belonged to the first owner, the Frenchman. People call it the Wolf Hill Villa, or the Weeping House. What do you folks want there? We just want to learn about its history, sir, Chloe replied gently. Old Man Miller looked her straight in the eye, then at Leo, and then at Ethan. His gaze lingered on Ethan, as if he saw something hidden behind the man's calm exterior. Its history is nothing good, he sighed, his voice low. It's a history of blood and tears. They say it's not just one or two ghosts in there. There are 7 sorrows, 7 souls that can't move on. They died there at different times, in different ways. But their vengeful energies have mingled, turning that house into a cage with no escape. Don't go there. That place doesn't welcome the living. We heard you used to work as a gardener there. Leo asked, his small recorder having been discreetly turned on. That was 40 years ago, when the last family was still living there, Old Man Miller replied, his voice distant. I only worked in the garden, never dared to go inside alone. Even during the day, the house was strangely cold. You always felt like someone was watching you from the upstairs windows. After that horrible night, no one dared to live there anymore. What horrible night, sir? Ethan asked, his heart beating faster. Old Man Miller shivered, despite sitting by the fire. The night that whole family, the last owner, all died. They say they killed each other, and the last one committed suicide. But no one knows for sure. All we know is that from then on, the house was officially haunted. Anyone who got curious and went there met with misfortune. The lucky ones came back and fell deathly ill, the unlucky ones, well, they just disappeared. He told a few more chilling stories, about mournful cries on rainy nights, about white shadows gliding through the garden. His warning was sincere, not some spooky tale told for entertainment. It came from a deep-seated fear. But for Ethan, his words only strengthened his resolve. 7 sorrows. A mysterious death. There were too many coincidences. He had to go inside. They thanked Old Man Miller and left as dusk settled. Leo drove along the trail the old man had pointed out, the path leading to the top of the hill. The truck could only go a little further before the path became blocked by fallen trees and rocks. Looks like we're walking from here, Leo said, pulling 3 high-powered flashlights from the trunk. They began to walk. The air was thick and freezing. The only sounds were the chirping of insects and the rustling of leaves under their feet. The night here was pitch black, without a single glimmer of city light reaching them. The beams from their 3 flashlights created only 3 small, trembling circles in the endless darkness. And then, they saw it. After a bend in the path, Serenity Villa appeared before them, looming on the hilltop like a slumbering beast. It was larger than Ethan had imagined, a two-story French colonial structure with a small turret on one corner, now dilapidated and desolate. The once white walls were now a grimy gray, mottled with moss and mildew. The wooden window frames were like black, empty eye sockets. A few window panes were shattered, revealing the thick darkness within. A dead bougainvillea vine clung to the facade like a skeleton. Surrounding it was a garden that had become a wilderness, with overgrown trees and bushes swallowing the path. The silence here was different. It wasn't an empty silence, but a heavy, expectant one. As if the whole house was holding its breath, watching them. "Oh my God!" Leo breathed, his usual confidence gone. "It's much more impressive than in the pictures." Chloe said nothing, just pulled her jacket tighter, her eyes full of anxiety. Ethan was the first to step forward. He felt as if he had been here before, in some dream. The iron gate was rusted and had collapsed on one side. He stepped through it, entering the yard. The layer of dry leaves was ankle deep, creating an eerie rustling sound. He stood before the massive main door, made of solid timber. It was faded and warped, but still stood firm. He raised his hand, hesitated for a moment, and then pushed. The door slowly swung open with a horrifying creak, long and drawn out like a moaning groan. A blast of cold, musty air rushed out from inside, carrying the smell of rotten wood, old paper, and something else indefinable, a scent of oblivion and sorrow. Ethan switched on his flashlight and aimed it inside. The darkness within was a deep abyss that seemed to swallow the light. He could dimly make out a large main hall, a winding wooden staircase leading to the upper floor, and furniture covered in white cloths, looking like silent, seated ghosts. "Are we going in?" Leo's voice came from behind him, trembling slightly. Ethan didn't answer. He just stepped over the threshold, into the darkness. The moment the heel of his shoe touched the wooden floor inside, a strange sensation washed over him. It felt as if he had stepped into another world, a space that operated by its own rules. And then, from somewhere on the second floor, a sound echoed. A tiny, faint sound, as if someone had accidentally dropped something. The three of them stood frozen, holding their breath, their flashlight beams sweeping across the room, painting ghostly streaks of light on the walls. Silence descended again. But this time, it was no longer an expectant silence. It was the silence of something that had just awakened. The first night in Serenity Villa had only just begun. In the main hall, Ethan, Leo, and Chloe stood huddled together, the three trembling circles of light from their flashlights scanning the darkness. The cold inside the house was different from the cold outside. It wasn't the chill of the weather, but a bone-deep cold that emanated from the very walls and floors, as if the place had been drained of all warmth long ago. "Probably just a rat," Leo said, trying to break the tense silence, but his voice lacked conviction. "Rats don't make a sound like that," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. It sounded like a glass marble dropping on a wooden floor. Ethan said nothing. He was listening. Not just with his ears, but with all his senses. He could feel a presence. A vague but distinct feeling that they were not alone. He aimed his flashlight up the grand timber staircase, its steps covered in dust but still solid. The banister was intricately carved with small lions, their mouths frozen in silent roars. His beam stopped at the landing. There was nothing there. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. "All right, what's the plan?" Leo asked, regaining some of his directorial composure. "We'll set up camp here, in the main hall. It's open enough, and we can watch the entrances. Ethan, you and I will check the first floor. Chloe, you stay here, set up the gear, and keep the walkie-talkie handy, okay?" Chloe nodded, seemingly relieved not to be venturing into the dark corners just yet. She put her backpack down and began to take out sleeping bags, a first aid kit, and other equipment. The flashlight she placed on the floor created a small, fragile oasis of light in the vast darkness. Ethan and Leo moved deeper into the house. They headed to the left wing of the hall, where a large double door stood. The door led to a luxurious living room, now just a shadow of its former glory. A grand piano stood in the corner, its ivory keys yellowed and coated with dust. A sofa and several armchairs were draped in white cloths, resembling a family of ghosts in a meeting. On the wall, a black marble fireplace gaped like an open mouth. Ethan approached the piano. He reached out and lightly brushed his fingers over the dusty keys. No sound came out. But as he pulled his hand back, he felt a tingling sensation in his fingertips, like a faint static charge. "See anything?" Leo asked, panning his camera around the room. His infrared camera allowed him to see clearly in the dark, but the image on the small screen was a haunting green and black. "Nothing," Ethan replied. "Just dust and decay." They continued through a dining room with a long table that could seat 20, and a large kitchen with tarnished copper pots and pans hanging on the walls. Everything was covered in the same thick layer of dust, a testament to decades of abandonment. When they returned to the main hall, Chloe had finished setting up their temporary campsite. 3 sleeping bags were laid out side by side, next to a battery-powered lantern that cast a warm, yellow glow. It looked safer, but the sense of unease still hung in the air. Suddenly, Ethan stopped. He looked towards his music box, which he had carefully placed on a small nearby table. "What is it?" Chloe asked, noticing the change in his expression. "The music box," Ethan said quietly. "Before, I placed it lying flat. Now it's standing upright." Leo and Chloe looked at each other. "You probably just misremember," Leo said. "Or the table is tilted." Ethan walked over and checked. The table was perfectly steady. He knew he hadn't misremembered. He was a man who paid extreme attention to detail. It was a professional requirement. He was 100% certain that someone, or something, had moved it. Before he could say anything else, another sound echoed through the house. This time, it came from directly above them. A series of soft clicks and creaks, as if someone was walking very lightly on the second-floor landing, trying not to make a sound. All three of them fell silent, looking up at the dark ceiling. The footsteps moved from one end of the upstairs hallway to the other, then stopped directly above where they were standing. Silence descended again. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He could hear Leo's heavy breathing beside him. And then, the unexpected happened. From the music box on the table, the familiar, mournful melody suddenly began to play, its clarity chilling in the silent space. Ethan jumped. He hadn't wound it. None of them had touched it. The music box was playing on its own. The melody played on, repeating over and over. It was no longer a sad tune. In this context, it was a signal, a ghostly welcome. Chloe backed away in fear, her hand clutching a small cross she wore around her neck. Leo, though his face had also gone pale, managed to keep his composure and aimed his camera at the music box. It's playing by itself, Leo stammered. I got it on camera. It's clearly playing by itself. Ethan slowly approached the music box. The sound seemed to be drawing him in. He felt an infinite sadness welling up inside him, a strange empathy with the melody. He reached out, intending to close the lid and stop the music. But just as his fingers were inches from the box, the music abruptly stopped. At the same moment, the footsteps upstairs resumed, this time running. Frantic, panicked footsteps, racing towards the end of the hallway before falling silent, as if the person had just vanished into thin air. The group stood frozen for several minutes afterward. No one dared to speak. The event was too clear, too impossible to be a coincidence or a hallucination. An invisible force was playing with them. I think we should reconsider staying here overnight, Chloe said, her voice trembling. No, Ethan replied, his voice strangely firm. We're not going anywhere. This is why we came. It's communicating with us. Communicating or warning us. Leo countered, although he too was caught up in the drama of the situation. I don't know, Ethan admitted. But I have to find out. I feel like Anna is connected to this. The music box. It's like a key. That night, none of them could sleep. They sat huddled around the lantern, startling at every random noise, the wind whistling through a broken windowpane, a dry branch snapping in the garden, or just the terrifying silence of the house itself. Ethan stared at the music box, now silent again. He felt a growing connection to this place. His own pain seemed to resonate with the sorrow of the house. He was no longer afraid, instead, he was filled with an obsessive curiosity. He wanted to know which spirit had walked the halls, which spirit had started the music box. He wanted to talk to them. Around 3 in the morning, when both Leo and Chloe had drifted off from exhaustion, Ethan quietly stood up. He picked up his flashlight and the music box and slowly made his way to the staircase. He had to go up there. He felt something calling him from the second floor. He took each step on the wooden stairs gently, trying not to make a sound. The floorboards creaked in protest. Reaching the second floor hallway, an even colder draft washed over him. The hall was long and narrow, lined with closed doors on both sides. His flashlight beam swept across old portraits on the walls. The strange faces in the pictures seemed to follow his every step, their eyes empty and mournful. He walked down the hall, pausing at each door. He tried pushing them gently, but they were all locked tight or jammed shut by time. He reached the end of the hall, where the footsteps had stopped earlier. There, a single door was painted white, different from the dark wood of the others. The brass doorknob had turned a mossy green. Unconsciously, Ethan reached out and turned the knob. And it opened. The door swung open silently. Inside, it was pitch black. Ethan took a breath and shone his light inside. It was a child's bedroom. A small bed was pushed against the wall, the bedding still there but moldy. In the middle of the room was a wooden rocking horse. And on the floor, between the horse and the bed, was something small and round, glinting in the light. Ethan stepped inside, feeling as if he were trespassing on sacred ground. He moved closer and bent down. It was a glass marble. It was exactly as Chloe had described. A clear marble with swirling veins of deep blue inside. Ethan stood frozen. So the first sound they heard was real. And it had come from this room. He felt as if the boy who owned this room was still lurking somewhere, watching him. He raised his head, sweeping his flashlight across the room. And then his heart stopped. On the wall opposite the bed were numerous children's drawings, scribbled in colored pencil. Drawings of the house, trees, the sun. But among them was one drawing that was much larger. A stick figure, lying in a bed. And standing beside the bed were 7 other figures, also crude stick drawings, but they were faceless. 7 black figures surrounding the bed. An intense shiver ran through Ethan. 7 sorrows. 7 figures. Had this child seen them? And then he noticed an even more terrifying detail. Above the drawing of the 7 figures, the child had written a line, the handwriting crooked but legible. "Don't sleep. They're waiting." Ethan backed away, bumping into the rocking horse and setting it in motion, its rhythmic, eerie creaks echoing in the silent room. He felt his throat go dry. Who was this warning for? The boy himself? Or for anyone who entered this room? He quickly turned to leave. But as his flashlight beam swept across the window, he froze. Outside the window, in the wild garden cloaked in night, he saw a figure standing. A woman in a white dress, her long hair obscuring her face, stood motionless under an old tree, staring towards him. No. Not at him. Staring into this room. Ethan stood petrified, not daring to breathe. He knew this was no illusion. The white figure was too clear, despite the distance. And then, a cold wind blew into the room through the broken window, making the rotten curtain flutter wildly. When the curtain settled, the woman was gone. Ethan bolted from the room, slamming the door behind him, his heart pounding as if it would burst. He ran down the hall and stormed down the stairs, making a thunderous noise. Leo and Chloe woke with a start, sitting up in a panic. "Ethan. What's wrong?" Ethan stood panting at the bottom of the stairs, his face ashen, his hands still clutching the glass marble. I saw one," he stammered. "I saw one of them." He recounted everything to his friends, the child's room, the strange drawings, the white figure in the garden. Chloe listened, her face growing paler. "A little boy and a woman in a white dress. From what old man Miller said, a boy drowned in the well, and the first French owner's wife also died mysteriously in the house. We're in a literal ghost nest," Leo concluded, but alongside the fear in his voice was an unconcealed excitement. He grabbed his camera. "Are you sure you saw her outside the window? Which angle? We have to get footage of that spot." But Ethan was exhausted. The shock had drained all his energy. He slumped to the floor and opened his clenched fist. The glass marble rolled across the wooden floor, glinting in the lantern light like a soulless eye watching them. They heard no more sounds that night. The house fell into absolute silence. But this silence was even more terrifying than the ghostly noises before. Because now they knew they weren't just facing an unknown force. They were facing real spirits, with stories, with pain, and possibly, with warnings. The weak Pinecrest dawn finally broke, the first gray streaks of light piercing through the fog in the filthy windowpanes. Daylight brought a false sense of security, but the heavy atmosphere inside Serenity Villa did not lift. The darkness didn't seem to vanish, but merely retreated, hiding in the shadows, waiting for night to fall once more. After a sleepless night, all three of them looked haggard. Leo was the first to regain his spirits, his professional curiosity overriding his fear. He reviewed the footage he'd shot during the night. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the small camera screen. The moment the music box started on its own, nobody was near it. "And this. When you ran downstairs, Ethan, look at this dust orb." He pointed to a faint, glowing speck floating near the staircase. "They call it an orb, a form of energy manifestation from spiritual entities. Or just a piece of dust reflecting the infrared light," Chloe countered, her voice still weary, but the rational researcher in her was kicking back in. "We can't jump to conclusions. But what about the white figure in the garden? And the child's room?" "That can't be dust," Ethan argued. He felt an urge to prove that what he had seen was real. They decided to explore the house systematically during the day. Leo would go with Ethan to film, while Chloe would stay in the main hall to study the tattered old documents they had found, hoping to piece together the house's history. Ethan led Leo to the second floor, back to the child's room. In the daylight, the room looked less frightening, but it exuded a heart-wrenching sadness. The drawings on the wall were clearer now. Leo carefully filmed a close-up of the words "Don't sleep. They're waiting." "This kid definitely went through something horrible," Leo muttered. Ethan walked to the window and looked down at the garden. He showed Leo the spot where he had seen the white figure the night before, under an old, sprawling flamboyant tree whose branches were lush even in its derelict state. In the daylight, there was nothing unusual about the spot. They decided to try opening the other doors in the hallway. Most were locked tight. But one door, after a few hard shoves from Leo, finally groaned open. Inside was a library. Thousands of books lay scattered on the floor, on tables, spilling from floor to ceiling wooden shelves. Many had been devoured by termites, the paper disintegrating at a touch. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and mold. "This place is a forgotten treasure trove," Ethan said, the passion of a restorer stirring within him. He picked up a leather-bound book and blew off the thick layer of dust. It was a collection of poetry by Victor Hugo, in French. While Ethan was engrossed with the books, Leo was drawn to something else. On the large mahogany desk in the corner, next to a rusted oil lamp and a dried-up inkwell, lay a small, black leather-bound notebook. "Ethan, come look at this." It was a diary. The pages were yellowed, but the black ink script inside was still very clear. It was written in a stylish, flowing female hand, entirely in French. "My mom was a French teacher," Ethan said. "I learned a bit as a kid. Let me try." He carefully turned each page, beginning to read aloud, his voice slow and hesitant. October 15, 1932. "So, we have arrived at Serenity. My husband, Philippe, says this will be our new beginning, a tropical paradise far from the suffocation of Paris. The house is magnificent. But I do not like it. There is an inherent sadness to this place. The air is too still. At night, the pine hills are frighteningly silent. I feel lonely." November 28, 1932. Philippe is increasingly busy with his work at the plantation. He is gone all day, sometimes all night. I am alone in this vast house with the native servants. They are kind, but they always look at me with a strange expression. They whisper amongst themselves in a language I do not understand. I have a feeling they are hiding something from me about this house. December 21, 1932. I had begun to hear things. The sound of a woman crying, echoing in the night. Philippe says I am imagining it, that it is just the wind howling through the mountain passes. But I know it is not the wind. It is the cry of someone in great pain. Sometimes, I smell jasmine in the hallway, though there are no jasmine trees in the garden. Ethan stopped reading and looked up at Leo. "Isabel. This is the diary of the French wife old man Miller mentioned." "Keep reading," Leo urged, his camera still fixed on the diary. Ethan turned to a page near the end. The handwriting here was shaky and erratic, as if written in a state of great agitation. February 4, 1933. He has betrayed me. Philippe, my beloved husband. I saw him with the servant girl. Right here in our garden. His smile, the look in his eyes for her. They were never for me. My world has collapsed. My loneliness has now turned to despair. The crying I hear in the night. Could it be my own future cries? This house knows. It knows everything. It is waiting to devour me, just as it has devoured others before. That was the last entry. The following pages were blank. Damn, Leo muttered. So she found out her husband was cheating and went mad. What happened next? According to Old Man Miller, she died mysteriously, Ethan said, closing the diary. She was the first sorrow. A spirit who died in loneliness and despair. He shivered suddenly. The scent of jasmine. Last night, when I was standing in the hallway, I smelled a faint fragrance. I thought it was just the smell of mold. They decided to take the diary down to Chloe. After hearing the story, she became intensely interested. This confirms my hypothesis. This house is like a lens. It focuses and amplifies negative emotions. Isabel's jealousy and suffering have become a part of this place. Perhaps the white figure you saw, Ethan, was her. But why Anna? Ethan asked suddenly, his voice breaking. Why did my sister come here? What does she have to do with these tragedies? His question was left hanging as a loud noise erupted from the kitchen, sounding as if someone had just thrown a stack of plates onto the floor.